Hi class, this is the second in a series of screencasts on libel and invasion of privacy and ethics. So today we're going to talk specifically about libel. And you can see before we were talking about overarching and undergirding, but libel. Libel, the heart of a libel case is defamation. There's actually 4 parts to a libel case that a plaintiff has to prove, all 4, or else the case will fail. They have to prove publication, identification, defamation, and level of fault. We'll come back to those, but defamation is the heart of this. And so when we talk about libel, we're talking about defamation that is, well, actually, I think a better word than printed would be published. Defamation that is published is libel. Defamation that is spoken is slander. So if you remember from the People's Court case where the one roommate was suing the other, started out as suing for property she said was stolen, and then it turned into a case of where very infamously Judge Wapner said, "Are you calling her a whore?" And it turned into this case of slander. So the reason that there's a difference between libel and slander is that libel is considered much more harmful, much more widespread and permanent. So if you publish something, whether it's a newspaper, a vlog, a blog, a newscast, anything really, any kind of communication, that publication can reach a lot of people very quickly. And as opposed to if you're just speaking to someone, like in this case where the roommate allegedly called her other roommate's sister and said, your sister's a prostitute, that would be slander because it's spoken. It's between a couple of people. And so it's considered then that the damage is far less than in slander than it is in libel where the defamation is published. So for our purposes, we'll be talking strictly about libel because when we're talking about the news business, whether it's a magazine, a newspaper, a blog, or television newscast, that's all considered published material. So that's libel. So getting back to this, publication, identification, defamation, and level of fault. So again, all 4 things have to be there. If any one of them fails, then the whole case fails. Well, let's check off publication. That's pretty much a given right now. There's your newspaper. There it is published. There's a recording of the TV news broadcast. There it is published. So we're, for our purposes, we're going to just check off publication as a gimme. Then identification. Defamation, again, is the heart. This is the thing that causes the damage. In any lawsuit, there's got to be damage. So defamation is the damage. It could be to your reputation. It could be to your business. It could be mental anguish. It could be, any form of damage. And if you don't identify the person, you publish some defamation. You say, hey, there's a person who's a wife-beating, child-molesting, card-carrying member of Al-Qaeda living in your neighborhood. If you don't identify the person, then there's no case because you can't defame somebody. You can't hold them up to hatred, contempt, ridicule, or scorn, which is defamation, if they're not identified. Now, you've got to be careful, though. Don't try and be cute where you give a little bit of information in one story and a little bit of information in a follow-up story and a little bit more information in a second follow-up story, where the reader comes to a conclusion of who the person is without you actually saying that. if the jury can figure that out, then you're in trouble. So, for example, if you were printing a story about somebody who was arrested for armed robbery, or alleged armed robbery, and you mentioned that the person is 36 years old with brown hair and brown eyes. Well, that's pretty vague. That isn't going to narrow in your community, narrow it down to any one specific person. But in a follow-up story, you say that this person is also a used car salesman on South Tacoma Way. Well, there's lots of car lots on South Tacoma Way. Again, it doesn't really narrow it down that much. But then in a third story, if you say this person is a member of the Moose Lodge, and if the public or members of the public can put together 2 + 2 + 2 and come up with 6, meaning, okay, you told me the person's 36 with brown hair and brown eyes, also works at a car lot on South Tacoma Way, and is a member of the Moose Lodge. If that narrows it down to where there's only one person, then you may very well have identified that person without actually naming the person. So you've got to be careful of not identifying somebody when you didn't mean to. I had a situation like that when I was a reporter for the Lake City Journal in Seattle. A young teenage girl was sexually assaulted. She was home alone and she was taking a nap on the couch. It was a hot summer day. The parents weren't home. I think she was 16, if I remember correctly. But her parents weren't home, and the house was hot, so they had opened up the windows upstairs to air it out. Well, somebody in the neighborhood who was aware of the girl and who was aware of the fact that the parents, nobody else was there, got a ladder, put it up against the house, climbed through the open upstairs window, came downstairs, and attacked the girl. Now, our policy when reporting crime at that point was to say, let's say somebody was burglarized, and we would say there was a burglary in the 1600 block of Cedar Street. So there's a lot of houses on both sides of the street, and we wouldn't give the exact address. We wanted to be as specific as possible to let people know in that area that there's a burglar working their area. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. But we didn't want to give the specific house because somebody else might be reading the story and it says, this house at 1621 Cedar Street was robbed of $10,000 of cash, electronics, and other items. Maybe another burglar is reading that story and saying, I'll give them a month. And once they've collected their insurance check, they're going to go out and buy a brand new television set, a brand new computer, a brand new stereo. And then I'll go burglarize their house and I'll get almost brand new stuff. So we wouldn't give the exact location, just to give to say it was the 1600 block was good enough. It was specific enough. Anyway, that's what I did. I said a teenage girl in the 1600 block of Cedar Street was attacked and sexually assaulted. Well, the day after the paper came out, the police department called us and was saying that the parents were extremely angry and were threatening to sue, and also to sue the police department for releasing her name to the news media, suing the news media for publishing her name and identifying her. Invasion of privacy, I guess, was really what they were looking at. And I argued that what difference would it have made? I mean, obviously, I felt bad if it caused the girl any more trauma than she'd already gone through. But if you're the only people who would know the girl on 1600 Cedar Street, and by the way, I should add, the way that she got identified was that she is the only teenage female living in the 1600 block of Cedar Street. Well, the only people who would know that would be the people living in the immediate area. And they certainly would put two and two together by looking out their window on the day of the attack and seeing police cars and ambulances. If I just said a teenage girl somewhere on Cedar Street was attacked, they would still put two and two together. So anyway, we ended up, against my protest, we ended up changing the policy for all crimes now to just saying the street. But imagine if you're reading an article and saying, a burglar is operating somewhere on South Tacoma Way. Well, you know how many miles long South Tacoma Way is, so that doesn't help a whole lot in letting people know that there's potential danger in their neighborhood. But anyway, she was identified, even if it was to a small group of people, and certainly was not my intent. Many papers, in fact, I would say 90% of newspapers, news media in general, will not publish the names of sexual assault survivors, even when it goes to court, even when it's part of a public document. It's just an ethical choice. There's nothing illegal about it. It's just an ethical choice that news media choose for reasons we'll talk about later. But I certainly didn't intend to identify her. So you got to be careful, either whether you're trying to be cute or whether you don't really think through what you're putting down. You don't want to identify somebody, particularly if you're talking about defamation. So I'm going to stop here and do a third screencast just on defamation, and then a fourth one on level of fault.